Everyone, Garry Adelman, American Battlefield Trust. Super psyched to be here at a new site for the first time. I've never been here before. We are at High Bridge, specifically at the High Bridge Trail State Park here in Virginia. I hope you've been following us as we've been going through Virginia. We were at City Point, we've been to Five Forks and the Breakthrough, and we're making our way past Sailors Creek. And here we find ourselves really here to talk about Lee's retreat and the actions that are really happening here on April 6th and April 7th, 1865. We're talking about a day or two before what's going to go on at Appomattox, and we will follow over that way. So let's get into this battle, let's get into this place, and let's start doing that with our good friend Matt Reusch. He's a ranger here at the High Bridge Trail State Park. Matt, welcome.
Well, thank you. Glad to have American Battlefield Trust here for the first time. Proud to welcome you all here. We have a brand new visitor center that was, got to show you, which I'm really happy about. So this is a day use park, almost 33 miles of trails end to end, former railroad. We are excited to offer the people the chance to come out here and see what we have to offer. Directly behind me is High Bridge, the 1914 envision of it. It's a great place, it's a great view. I highly suggest everybody come out and see it.
I couldn't agree more. And by the way, it's good to be at a park where the name of it well describes what it is, and we'll show you B-roll here. This is an aptly named place. Now, there's some real deal fighting here, and it is hard to stand out. I mean, April 65 is a pretty busy time, so you've got all these battles happening. It's going to get partly obscured by Appomattox, but this is the real deal. What are some of the highlights of this battle?
Sure. So April 6th, Lee needs another crossing point following Sailors Creek. There is going to be a fight here. What the objective is, Union Army is going to attempt to burn High Bridge on April 6th. They're going to send about 880 men to this area to burn this. And they're going to bring a brass band with them. Don't know why, but they bring a brass band. What's going to happen is they're going to be intercepted by Confederate cavalry about 1.5 miles south-southeast of here. That fight is going to ensue. Confederates are actually going to win a pretty handily victory here. They're going to preserve High Bridge for its use. There is about 100 casualties in this fight. 880 infantry are going to be captured as well. That's the fighting here on April 6th, but what it does do is it gives Lee an opportunity to preserve High Bridge. He's going to need that crossing point across the Appomattox as we move forward into April 7th.
Yeah, Matt, and that was a great description here. So to back up a little bit, what's happening is that Lee's moved out of Petersburg and Richmond. He's moving towards the west. His ultimate goal is to move into the Carolinas and link up with Joe Johnston's army group that is down, which is coming around Raleigh, North Carolina. So as he's moving into this direction, he's actually trying to go down towards the south, but the Federals are pretty pesky, keep kind of blocking his way to getting to the south. So he keeps pushing them west, west, west. He gets to Amelia Courthouse, where he's supposed to have supplies, Lee is. The supplies that he needs aren't there. It's a snafu within the Confederate High Command. He has more ordnance than he actually has rations, and then has to keep moving out towards the west. So High Bridge is going to be a very important point here. So it's built in 1853-54?
It's completed in 1854, the entire railroad line, yes.
And this is part of the Southside Railroad, correct?
Yes.
So we have 5 railroads running in and out of Petersburg. Very important. Southside Railroad is one of those railroads that's going to play into the latter stages, especially of this campaign. So with the Southside Railroad came right through here. And how long is this bridge?
Well, the original bridge, the one that we talk about for 1865 purposes, is right around 2,500 feet. Today, it's about 2,400 on the modern day incarnation of the bridge. Either way, it's a little over half mile. It's a fairly long stretch to have open.
And it stands about 125 feet above the riverbed?
That is correct, yes.
And to think about this, you have basically a few rivers below us, but to get across a very small portion of a river, you have a nearly 2,500 foot bridge. And it was at the time thought to be the longest in the world?
It was. There is a quote from the chief engineer of the Southside Railroad who calls it the longest, tallest bridge in the world at one point. Now, that's not true today anymore, but for the time, it was a modern feature of it. Was just a marvel of engineering.
Absolutely. And I mean, even to this day, I mean, if you see the pictures, which will flash up here, it's pretty impressive. So we know how important it is. So the Confederates don't just have a bridge here, Matt, they also have other fortifications, correct?
That's correct. There was 2 on either side, the east and west bank of High Bridge, that guarded the approaches. They were garrisoned by some fellows from Louisiana, Donaldsonville Cannoneers. They're going to be sent here in 1864. They're going to provide the defense here along with some Virginia reserves. And they have a very good existence here. They're the ones who give the name Camp Paradise to this sector of the Southside Railroad, which they're guarding. They have a great time here. all the way up until April of 1865.
Things changed a little bit. Those
Things
guys
changed.
from Louisiana are under the command of Francis Walker. He's wounded in the war 3 times, and after the war, he runs for the governorship of Louisiana. And his veterans would say, "We will vote for whatever's left of Frank Walker because of how many times he had been wounded during the Civil War." But the 3rd Virginia Reserves are up here, and some others. So it's April 6th. We have the Confederate Army moving out to the west, kind of northwest, to trying to get away from where we are and trying to eventually make that turn down into the Carolinas. That's the idea. So now the Union Army of the James will start to send troops into this direction. So we have the 4th Massachusetts Cav, about three companies of them, the 123rd Ohio, 54th Pennsylvania, a brass band, because I mean, if we're going to burn this bridge, we're going to burn it in style, because the first operation on April 6th, and there are 2 of them, is to come up here for the Federals, burn this bridge, and then if we're the Confederates, we're going to try to get across it. We're going to try to protect it. The next day, it's a complete role reversal, where the Federals want to save the bridge and the Confederates want to take it. So let's talk a little bit about that April 6th action a little bit more. We have Tom Rosser and Tom Munford. They're dispatched by James Longstreet, Lee's right hand, to come into this area after they find out that there's a group of about 800-ish Federals coming this way?
Yeah, there's about 800 infantry and 80 from the 4th Massachusetts Cavalry that are detached to actually burn High Bridge. The 4th Cavalry is going to make reconnaissance towards Farmville. They're going to make initial contact with Virginia Reserves and the Donaldsonville Cannoneers that are actually on the outskirts of Farmville. They're going to return to this area once they hear gunfire coming from behind them. So what's happened is those Confederate cavalry that you mentioned have now engaged 2 Union infantry regiments, the 123rd and the Ohio Regiment, the 53rd. They're going to be fighting in this Chatham plantation behind us, about 1.5 miles southeast of here. And that fighting is going to progress. The fighting is so desperate that the 4th Massachusetts Cavalry is going to make 4 successive charges, bayonets drawn, or sabers drawn, just crashing into the Confederate cavalry that's both mounted and dismounted. These are desperate fighting. Tom Rosser calls it some of the most desperate fighting he's ever seen. That Massachusetts regiment is going to be decimated. It's wiped out almost to a man. We do have some really interesting accounts that come out of it. Highly encourage people to read into the 4th Mass. What's also happening is the 123rd and the Ohio folks, they're all going to be fighting at Watson's Farm. But they're pretty tired. They've been marching from Burkeville. They're going to be bottled up, and eventually they're just going to surrender outside the fortifications at Camp Paradise.
It's so, and to wrap this up, the one thing I want to say is the Confederates, in this case, outnumber the Federals.
They do.
Something you don't hear a lot during this campaign. They also are going to be counterattacked by the 4th Massachusetts Cav only have about 85 guys here, and they're going to keep charging against these veteran Confederates. But one man I want to talk about on the Confederate side is James Deering. As we were joking as we walked up here, he was a one-man wrecking crew up here. Can you tell us a little bit about James Deering and his role here? West Point graduate. He's a Campbell County native here in Virginia, and he does a lot during the Civil War.
Right, and he's obviously served quite a bit in different functions inside of the Army of Northern Virginia. At this point, when he comes here, he's got a cavalry command, and he is going to be leading his men into some of that fighting with the 4th Massachusetts. Now, there is some stories about him and Colonel Francis Washburn actually coming to a saber duel, and that's still some area of speculation, but he's going to be in the midst of this desperate fighting that the 4th Massachusetts is going to make. And he ultimately is going to be mortally wounded during this fighting. He's going to die about 2 weeks later, actually, in his home in Lynchburg.
So Washburn is the colonel of the 4th Mass Cav, and the 2 of them allegedly, as Matt pointed out, duel with sabers, and then at one point Deering maybe pulls out his pistol and shoots him. He also, Deering, shoots the chief of staff for the Army of the James at one point, a brevet brigadier general. And Deering himself is mortally wounded, as Matt pointed out, and potentially, as somebody had said, maybe by one of his own men in the melee that was up here.
There is some speculation that there's a lot of stories with that, and like you mentioned, Theodore Reed, the chief of staff, that he's been personally sent here to direct the bridge burning operation on April 6th. That kind of turns into a bit of a fiasco for the Union Army at this point.
And to wrap this portion of the story up, with James Deering, and I'm going to get the keyboard warriors with this one. Yes, James Deering was a colonel. He was a brigadier general at times. He wasn't fully a brigadier general because he was never confirmed by the Confederate Congress. But on the field here at High Bridge, he was a brigadier general in acting name. So there are some people who will talk about that. We're also talking about Thomas Smith versus Thomas Smythe, who's a Union general, the last one to die here in the Eastern Theater and in the war. Do you call him Thomas Smith? Do you call him Thomas Smythe? You can choose. We're calling him Smythe up here on this one. So
That's absolutely right.
something we were talking about on the way up here. But Matt, anything else you want to say about the April 6th action to close this off before we move to a different location? Stick with us here at High Bridge.
The last thing I'll say is this is a crucial crossing point from Sailor's Creek. This is what Lee uses to get the remnants of a lot of his army coming across. They're going to be crossing at night. The weather is bad. We have a couple of accounts of soldiers actually falling off High Bridge during that retreat. But it does keep this crucial lifeline open for General Lee as he is trying to continue to move his army.
All right, and with that, what we're going to do is move to a different point. Stick with us. We're going to do the role reversal. Confederates win this time, and High Bridge remains. But now the next step in this campaign is to try for the Confederates to burn High Bridge, and if we're the Federals, take it and cross and keep in pursuit of Lee's army. Stick with us.
Man, I'm so glad we came all the way down here because this is a view I am enjoying right now. Even as we shoot, we have obviously come down below the High Bridge. You can see the original piers of the High Bridge next to the modern bridge here. And man, we're not done talking about the history because on April 6th, we already talked about, but on the 7th, you've got fire on the bridge, you've got a firefight, you've got acts of valor, and you've got an army trying to move. Take it away, Matt.
Absolutely. So welcome to the morning of April 7th. We're standing in the location of where a wagon bridge would have been that ran down below the valley floor here on the Appomattox River. So on April 7th, Confederates have fired the western approach to High Bridge. So this would have been on fire on April 7th, the morning of April 7th. Union soldiers know that they need High Bridge. They need to take High Bridge. They need another way across to continue that pursuit of Robert E. Lee. It is an imperative that they capture High Bridge, or at least the wagon bridge down below, to get a beachhead on the other side of the Appomattox. So on the morning of April 7th, where we're standing, Confederate engineers would have been trying very desperately to fire a wagon bridge. The problem is it's been raining, the bridge is wet, it's got green timber, it's not catching.
And you could almost really sort of see it in the picture that will flash up here. You can almost just see that this is going to be tough.
Absolutely. So on the morning of April 7th, the Union Army's already here. So in the morning, this fight is going to develop right down here in this valley below us. The 19th Maine is going to come charging down this hill, being specifically told, capture this wagon bridge. They're going to take the lead on this assault. Colonel Isaac Starbird is going to lead his men down the hill. He's going to hit the Confederate engineers that are on the wagon bridge. That fight is going to kickstart. More Confederate troops are going to come from Farmville. They're going to clash down here in the valley. Now the Union Army does take the wagon bridge in a fight, and that's going to enable the Second Corps to continue the pursuit of the Confederate Army towards Farmville.
So what we're having happening is the Battle of Sailor's Creek is taking place on April 6th. It's a catastrophe for the Confederates. They've lost more than 8,000 men. They've also lost a number of generals and even a Commodore of the Confederate Navy out there. So now we are trying to keep going towards the west, as we talked about earlier in this video. Keep going and try to maybe get towards Farmville, beyond to Appomattox. And the idea is to try to gain rations for the Confederate soldiers. They need these rations first so they can feed the army. Then the next move is to make a big sweeping turn south to try to get into North Carolina. But as we're seeing here, we have a rear guard action, little Billy Mahone, who is ironically a railroad engineer, and I'll kick it over to Matt in a second, who is defending for the Confederates, and then Andrew Humphreys' Second Corps. Hancock's no longer in command of the Union Second Corps. He is coming in hot pursuit with those orders to take the bridge, keep it intact, so that the pursuit of the Union Army group, as we would call that today, could keep up with them. So one thing that you mentioned about Billy Mahone that was interesting to me is that Billy comes back here after the war.
He does. He does. So he's actually sent back in 1865, and after the war is over, he's going to be sent to repair the damage that has been done to the High Bridge, or Southside Railroad crossing here. And he will have that finished in September of 1865. So fire's done. The fighting is in this area, April 7th, 1865. The bridge is functional by early September of 1865. courtesy of Billy Mahone.
There you go. And I think it's important, too, to remember that this isn't the only railroad bridge that'll be along the South Side Railroad. We also have the Danville Railroad here. The idea that the Confederates and the Union soldiers would do is if they're not rail cars going across them, they could plank some of these and move to the west if you're the Confederates or the Union soldiers. So the idea is to try to slow down the enemy if you're in front of them by destroying the bridges, and if you are in pursuit, you want to keep those bridges intact to keep the pressure on the enemy. So with that, the bridge span that's down here, we had the wagon bridge, we have the historic photo, we have the historic railroad bridge. The Confederates are unable to completely fire the bridge.
That's correct. Right. There is about 4 spans on the other side of the river that are on fire, and Union pioneers are actually running across High Bridge while the fighting is going on to cut fire breaks to at least minimize some of the damage that will take place here. But the wagon bridge supports caissons, it supports men, it supports wagons. So the wagon bridge is crucial here. They're also going to throw pontoons, like you mentioned. They are going to pontoon here and closer to Farmville as well to push more troops immediately into the fighting.
Yeah, and those pontoon bridges are temporary bridges. Robert E. Lee's going to try to use them through the campaign. There are some problems getting those into the various rivers as we're going out here to the west. The Federals are doing the same thing, bringing their engineers with the pontoon bridges, the temporary bridges. So we have a lot of moving parts that are taking place here, and this is just one part of that story. And bridges are so crucial. We'll see that at Sailor's Creek when one of the bridges collapses up at the Twin Bridges near the Lockett Farm. And we'll have other bridging because this is April of 1865. Matt, before we close off, why don't we talk just for a moment what the weather's like, as well as these rivers. How wide are we talking about the rivers would be down here, and how deep would they be?
Sure. So what we see today does not reflect what was here during April of 1865. It would have been a little bit more narrower and deeper. So the night before, April 6th, it had been raining. So the water was definitely cresting over this wagon bridge, only frustrating the Confederate engineers even further. They're literally just trying to light the silly thing on fire, and the water's just cresting over the side. The flip side of that is when the Union is here to take the wagon bridge, it makes their job of fighting the fire that did develop a little bit, it makes their life a lot easier. So it would have been a little bit narrower, but deeper. There's no good fording points. This is it. This is the wagon bridge. This is crucial for crossing.
And for those of you asking, why don't they blow up the bridge, use high explosives? We're still about 10 years away from having high explosives in the military. We still haven't invented it to the point. We have black powder, but we don't have those high explosives. And as Matt pointed out, Mother Nature is also a real key factor throughout this campaign. We'll see it impacting the Confederates as well as the Federals as we move on. So Matt, as we close off, is there anything else you want to tell us about not only High Bridge 1865, but High Bridge 2025?
Well, one last thing I will add about April 7th, 1865, is the fighting that starts here is going to spread to Farmville. And it is pretty nasty fighting. There's railroad cuts involved. And during that fighting, the last Union general to die during the Civil War, Thomas Smythe, or Smith, if you prefer, he's going to be wounded right outside of Farmville. And he'll die on April 9th, about 4 in the morning, in a house that still actually stands at Burke Station. He'll pass away not knowing the outcome of the sacrifice he's going to make. So I do want to leave folks with that. It's a crucial piece of our story. The site that he was wounded at is marked on our trail. But as for High Bridge 2025, we have a brand new visitor center that is opening in April. We have a grand opening slated. We'd love to show you the High Bridge Trail. I want to show you the Civil War history here, but it's also a hiking, biking, horseback riding, choose your own adventure type trail. High Bridge is a special place. We'd love to have you all come see it.
Yeah, we encourage you to come out and see it. And I think we talk a lot about the firsts of the war. And now we're seeing the lasts of the war, the last Union general to die, the last Confederate general to die with Deering, the last Union battle flag in the Army of the Potomac captured, the 5th New Hampshires. We see a lot of those last, but for most of you, this is probably a first, actually getting out here to High Bridge. So we encourage you, as you're making that trail out from Richmond or Petersburg towards Appomattox, make sure that you stop along the way. Hit Cumberland Church, Sailor's Creek, and of course, High Bridge here. So Matt, thank you for hosting us this morning. Thanks to Garry Adelman in front of and behind the camera. Thanks to our supporters who have helped us to come out here and bring you a High Bridge. And do check out their website and come out here. They have their 160th coming up, but it's going to be here beyond. They have a new trail center, great place to come out, walk. And we really encourage you to check out this portion of the trail towards Appomattox. And on behalf of the American Battlefield Trust, I'm Kris White. I want to thank you for watching. Please click that subscribe button, click that like button, and thank you for supporting battlefield education and preservation.
Hello, this is Trace Atkins. To stay up to date on all the latest and coolest videos, please subscribe to the Trust YouTube channel. Preserve, educate, inspire.